Welcome to The Prize Inside. The Prize Inside. A chiropractor's journey in everyday holistic health and vitality. Here, your host, Dr. Jeromy Myers, delves into the remarkable journeys of everyday people who have embraced the path to health and healing. Through his practice, Dr. Jeromy encounters inspiring stories of profound transformation and the power of true healing within each of us. Stay tuned as we discuss various holistic topics and unlock the healing potential that lies within us all.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to, let me bring this down. Welcome to the 1% Tribe, Sunday edition of The Prize Inside. Hopefully you guys are having a great day. Man, my hat's all messed up today. Sorry about that. My little tags I had on. That's always good. So hopefully you guys had a great week. Some cool things. Tonight's episode is pretty cool. I like looking at the books I've read in my life, and one of them just happened to be this topic that we're going to discuss tonight. And it was a book. I remember it like very, very. So my daughters, when they were really young, there was this little, there's a place in town here. It's Mingus Creek Athletic Club, right? And so as we go through, we could take them. We could be, swimming pool members. They had this little tiny swimming pool, not anything huge or crazy. So not a lot of people did it. But my goodness, when you have a 4-year-old and a 2, or, like 2 and a 1, and just to get dipping in a pool was fantastic. Well, across the street from there was one of our libraries. And so we would go swim for a while, then go get a couple library books, and then go from there. Well, in my world, many of the books, after Barnes and Noble happened, I was addicted to just buying the books I've ever wanted, right? So I had usually brought my own books, into the library. Didn't really, find anything. Usually. So I started looking this time. I always looked, but I didn't ever find much, and I was more worried about, I think it's the Blockbuster situation. If you guys remember, most of you are old enough to remember, man. I was just telling Lexi, my youngest, like, did you know there was a time when you rented a movie, you went and you better had remembered to go on the day that it was due, number one, or else it was like $1.50. And then if you didn't rewind it, you'd have penalty points for that. So you had to get these cool, like, fast rewinders and stuff like that. So of course the library book was like, well, you can just buy it, and then you don't have to worry about taking it back because you don't want the penalty, the evil penalty of $1, right? Or whatever. But so anyway, so long story short, this book was absolutely fantastic. And we're going to talk about the author tonight. It's about expertise and the power of intuition. Okay. And so what we're going to do is tonight is a little different in the sense of, I want you to think of, maybe some of you out there are experts in a certain field, right? And tonight is going to be about kind of starting to take that expertise into your own health and vitality. Okay. So tonight is not necessarily that you have to be doctor level expertise, but understanding health and health and healing, the innate intelligence of the human body, from a perspective of being at the top level of your game, right? And so the more intuition and more expertise and the more time we do study in this, the better off we do. I'll give you the story of Dan. Dan is still to this day, Dan is one of my favorite. And once you all get up to 95 years old, driving your own car and, have more social activities than most normal humans, then you'll understand that. So Dan he's 95. And one of the things that I always thought was neat was I've been in this 26 years. So I've known Dan that entire 26 years. And I got to know him, right when I was coming in practice is when his wife had passed away. And so Dan and I had a different relationship. I was the young doctor that it was pretty easy to talk to. Sometimes it's easier to talk to your chiropractor because, on a lot of it, you're not worried, too much about, oh man, what are we going to do now? That kind of thing. So Dan and I got to know each other pretty good when he lost his wife. One of the things that happened was that he started getting pretty depressed. It was his best buddy. He'd been doing stuff forever together. And he's like, I don't even feel like living, and I go, oh, that sucks. And there's not a lot you can say there. Your best buddy just died, those kind of things. So we would talk, and I'm young and stupid enough as a doctor to be like, well, Dan, what do you like to do? I know you ask me all these nutrition questions constantly. And I jokingly said to Dan, I was like, why don't you just start studying, like go to Barnes and Noble or the library and pick up like a nutrition book and start reading it. I know you really enjoy that subject. So this is 26 years ago, guys. So, do the math on this. Dan starts studying, and this is kind of inspiring to this story. So Stan starts to create one of the things he can't stop reading these nutrition books, things about the health and human body and all these different things. And he starts going down these paths where every time I'd see him, he had a new, really legit good question. And so I want us to be all like Dan, a 95-year-old that's studying things that matter to us, right? And there's not much that matters more than our health and vitality, right? So before we get started on that topic, let's talk about a few things. Subscribe to me on the Prize Inside a Chiropractor's Journey on Rumble. The Prize Inside a Chiropractor's Journey on YouTube. Any of those, go get there, subscribe. It's free. You can go watch all the different episodes. You can watch the last one I did with Mary Trupiano, who has a smaller cerebellum than everybody. That was a really good interview. And that she has a caboose in the back of her house, which is crazy. I have 3 or 4 more. I got a Tai Chi expert coming in 2 weeks to talk about that as well. So don't miss an episode. The Prize Inside a Chiropractor's Journey, Rumble and on YouTube. So I'd love to see you guys there. And the last thing is become a newsletter subscriber where you get all these. Right now I'm streaming to that same newsletter group. It's called Tribe One, tribe1.substack.com. So tribe1.substack.com will get you to some great information there. So with that said, let us get started on tonight's presentation. And I won't keep you too long on it, but it's called The Sources of Power, Rewiring Intuition of Self-Healing. And what we're going to talk about is an author you may have never heard of before. So that's going to be really, really cool. Okay, so let's get started. This author of 2 different books, his name is Gary Klein. Okay, so his name is Gary Klein. And these books I would recommend highly. They're old, they're cheap, worth the read on everything. So Gary Klein was a cognitive psychologist who pioneered naturalistic decision-making by studying real experts in high-stakes, real-world settings, firefighters, military commanders, nurses, chess masters, pilots, also in golf as well. rather than lab subjects. So he went out and studied actual people with these high levels of expertise in a field. Contrast with traditional rational analytical decision models, they weigh criteria and pick the highest score. He went out into the actual field and like started studying these different experts in the field. Okay. The biggest thing is what he found, when you're talking to a true expert in the field, the pressure, the stakes, all of those things, they were able to do more with what they had than a lot of people that were what we'd say novices. That's why tonight is such a critical topic that I'd like to bring up. So why are we going over this tonight? Why this Gary Klein? Okay. And we're going to go into his 2 books very, very well. So when we begin to look at one of the largest areas in our life, which is our health and vitality, we should really get good at making great decisions in the sick care model we currently live. Now, what I mean by that, a lot of times, one of the things that is occurring is we're letting our health go, in the sense of we allow ourselves to get sick and then do things about it, right? Where we really need, and one reason, and the biggest reason, is because that's what we always have done, right? Our sick care healthcare system is built on the premise that I need a doctor when I'm sick, right? And I'm not going to talk about or look into those ideas of health and healing until that moment comes. Okay. Now, that's not necessarily true in every case. So don't, in general, we kind of do that, right? We don't, we get the flu and then we start taking vitamin C, right? Is that not true? We get a cough, we start taking the anti-coughs, right? So those are the things that we've done in natural ways, just in the culture that which we have. That's why I always call it a sick care model of health and healing. Now that becomes a problem, right? And so that's what we're going to look at tonight, and how to make better decisions in that framework. So my listeners understand the ability to continually learn about their own health. But think of what is the one time you need to think critically in our lives. We have to think critically on our feet when it comes to health and well-being. So when we're faced with this sick care model in a situation that's not the greatest, right? How is our intuition? How is our different levels of expertise in those areas to make the right decisions? Okay. And so this is what billionaires are made from, that we don't do a lot of these different decisions for ourselves. We're told, hey, just do them, let that go, learn how to do construction, do something else with your life, but, maybe not study that, stuff too much. And that's why the most fascinating thing about this author that I remembered years ago at a Willard library constantly brought it up. It was a patient that brought it up, and we're going to go through that subject of what it does when you have this expertise and kind of intuition. Okay. And I hate using the word expertise in this situation, right? You don't have to be an expert, but understanding how those things portray themselves can be really, really good in the most minute details of our health and longevity. Okay. All right. Hopefully this is making sense. I thought I was doing. Hopefully, if you guys have any questions, let me know, because I think this is a really good subject, and I just want to make sure. Sometimes I think they're good subjects, but that's not how it really works. So when we okay, let's see. Okay. So when we are looking to look at how the experts, so what we're going to do tonight is look at how the experts look at decision making and intuition. Doctors that study the subject in the health and wellness have a huge, expertise advantage in this and intuition in this, right? In this holistic space. Now, our goal as human people is to get better and better at this. We don't have to be a pure expert. There's even more experts each time, right? Each level there can be. There's always somebody smarter than you in the room. And this is that situation. Even if you know, don't know one thing about health in general, this is a subject you can't really let go, right? So that's one reason. That's why, in chiropractic, there's so many people that have made it such a big deal to become holistic seekers, right? Holistic, naturopathic. They're constantly listening, reading, getting this information they're always interested in health and longevity. But how do we take it to the next level? How do we take an interest into something that you can really, really count on? And that is what we're going to talk about. But we have to really dive in and dedicate serious effort into health and holistic living and understanding and knowledge. See, one of the things about chiropractic in general that got me into where I'm at today in these podcasts is chiropractic is much, much more than just a procedure. It always has been. It's a philosophy of life that if your innate ability and your innate intelligence of your cells is allowed to thrive at the highest level it possibly can, then health can be as big as we want to, right? We can literally have, stem cells replace things as our body naturally goes if the innate intelligence is able to do these things. The innate intelligence within us, if you haven't heard me say this, is we are inborn with an intelligence within us, kind of like like what I would say of right now is our AI, right? Automatically doing all these processes and systems. And then we have this intelligence given to us by God because the universal intelligence around us, the earth, has its own set of intelligence and systems. And our job is to adapt and be cooperative within that system. It gets a little philosophical, but it's very true. And one of the things that's neat about that is what we can do is learn how to make our system, our innate intelligence, the best it possibly can. And the way we can do that is through three things. And we call it thoughts, toxins, trauma. Okay. These three areas where the innate intelligence can be create miscommunications or the innate intelligence not as good as it should. Let's use high stress, toxic environment chemically, and trauma, like something happens of an injury, right? So those three physical things are what we would say is the biggest Kickstarter to understanding and getting our innate intelligence to that next level is if we constantly look at our thoughts, our toxins, and our traumas. Okay. So I want to give you this, my friend. I have another close friend. He's not with us now, and it was about 7 or 8 years ago. My friend, oh, by the way, I'm doing hibiscus and raspberry tea again. This stuff's delicious. This is going to be hard for me to not grab the hibiscus out of all there. But anyway, so Dave was a man that I had a lot of respect for. Very nice, very big into a lot of the community activities of our area in Battle Creek. We got to know each other a lot over the years. And one of the things that was kind of sad, he lived a lifestyle that was a little more toxic, let's say. Let's go in that direction. So a lot of toxicities, drinking, smoking, blah, blah, blah. So all the toxicities that you would have. The hard part is when those toxicities started to catch up with his innate intelligence. He ended up with a pretty severe cancer. But in his life, he had always just kind of lived on that edge, that cutting edge of all these different things, party till it's done, like it was all those things, right? And it was a hard conversation because I knew deep down, like he really wanted to change to trying to live a more cleaner, healthier life, but he had done it for so many years. It was really, really difficult for him to do. And of course, this doesn't make people bad people. It doesn't make any of that. He was a glorious person. The problem is when when he got this cancer that was very, very terrible, he had to make the decision and he just chose not to. And this is what is tough in this conversation. But he wanted to do holistic, natural ways to fight this cancer that he had. And of course, sometimes you get, you get those questions as a chiropractor. And because, it's one of those things where you go and when I got to talk to Dave, one of the things I said is that I don't believe this is the time for any of that. The toxicity that you've lived in isn't going to allow this holistic to really work and manifest into some kind of cancer improvement that you would want to see. My high recommendation is to do the cancer treatment as your medical doctor does, because I don't see you having control or expertise or any of those kind of things over the top of what you got going. Now, I didn't get like that. We just said, Dave, do what you can do to make sure you're feeling the healthiest you could. He ended up doing those things, but he didn't, he was very depressed with me saying that there wasn't going to be 5 herbs that were going to get him out of this scenario, and that was sad for him, but also kind of relief in a way, because then we just worked on other things. We're like, okay, you got to have this chemo, this radiation. It's going to be terrible, but this is the stuff we could do. And so we did a lot with Dave. It was pretty cool. He had to go through the medical procedures, obviously, but our job was to regenerate his body every time he felt good. And so a lot of times it gave us a new goal. He was going to get this chemo. He's going to get this radiation. And his goal after that, the next day, was to work, feel as good as he possibly could. And so that's where all of our focus was. Unfortunately, he's not with us today based on, those kind of things, but it's one of those to understand, this guy had the world pretty well. Ask Steve Jobs if he would have rather had, a bazillion dollars in the bank or his health. Those are the big questions that, like a lot of times that happens. And that's why my push tonight is to have you guys become that expert, right? So become that expert, get some intuition behind you and really study it. A lot of this stuff is so important to have the health of your body, that the more you understand and the more the physiology starts making sense, the more the natural ways make sense to you. And having a coach along, like a chiropractor, can be super, super helpful as well. Don't give it to somebody. That's the key. Okay. All right. So what we're going to go over the rest of the thing, how experts in the various fields make decisions. Okay. So think of this in a health expert field. Okay. So let's say doctor, but I want you guys to kind of visualize, all of us are kind of experts in different fields. Some of us were experts in the corporate America. Some people are experts in, my wonderful mother was expert at the 6th grade teaching for 40 years, experts in the field. How do they make decisions in the different situations that they're there? Using this knowledge, we can start looking at our own health and healing journey and use that help to create a remarkable journey. So let's say I'll use my mother, for example. So let's say I'm this badass 6th grade teacher. Okay. So I'm sweet, 40 years, goes all the way through. And what would I do and how would I approach a health problem? Got a little group of people here tonight, so you'll get a little barky. But when we make those decisions, go into that field of what you're comfortable with, right? So think if I was an expert in being a sixth grade teacher, how hard could it be to, understand, what a good carbohydrate is? See what I mean? So that's what I want you to think in the experts. How do we make decisions? Okay. So this is from Dr. Craig's first book called this is from his first book was called Sources of Power. So just to let you know that. It was like 25 years. I still can't believe I found the author. I was like, remember this guy? And this is exactly what it is. So the core model that he uses in Sources of Power was recognition prime decision making. So this is how experts actually decided. They rapidly size up a situation and recognize it as familiar. There's a pattern that matches. The recognition immediately suggests that a typical workable course of action, not by comparing multiple options, but that you're looking at these different courses of action because of your experience. Mentally simulate, run a mental movie of how the action will unfold. It's always fun when Olive, for some reason, has to hang out with me, but every door that moves barks quite a bit. Okay, so I will get through this. If it looks viable, act. If problems appear, modify, and then try a next plausible option. Okay, so what he did was he studied these different people, and let me explain. So one of the things that was big from this book was a expert fireman. So there was a forest fire. He was an expert in forest fires, and he had done battling forest fires for many, many years. The study is, and we'll get into it a little bit, he was taking students out to teach them how to take out this forest fire. And they have a literal forest fire they're going after. And as they're walking through the forest fire, or, trying to take out this forest fire, there's a change in wind. And this change in wind makes everybody start to panic and run the other direction. Now they're all students versus the expert that is trying to get all of these students' attention. And we'll talk about that because once this occurs, this change of wind happens, the expert immediately goes into what the experience would be and what I have to do to survive this situation. So as he's trying to, talk to his students, they're running. And the problem is in this situation, this is a true life story, that most of the students end up perishing because there's a cliff or they died from the smoke. The fire literally engulfed them. The expert, on the other hand, understood, and this is the first time that this happened in our history. He understood that he had to think of something through intuition. It had never been done before, but he was trying to get his students to burn a circle around their body and sit in the circle. So now this is something that the world uses to, if a fire turns on you, this is the situation that most expert forest fire people use now. Is they'll burn a hole and then sit in that fire to survive in some kind of situation like that. So if you think of what that means, right? So that was his expert that had never been done before, right? And that was his expert and intuition in how to survive based on his experience that was happening in that moment, right? And so that is one of the key pieces to why I'm bringing up this now. The more expertise and the more challenge that you can do on your own, right? As far as a health and healing objective, the better off your chances are being intuitive when the next health challenge happens. So let's give an example of, let's say you hurt your shoulder. Okay. Let's say you hurt your shoulder pretty significantly. So you hurt that shoulder, you fell, but this time you're like, you know what is good for a shoulder? So all of a sudden, instead of just waiting around until this next doctor's appointment. Let's say it's 3 weeks away and you can't get to the doctor until then. So you basically don't touch it. So a lot of us would like ice it. And then sometimes it's like, okay, well, I know the shoulder moves in all these different directions. So why don't I test the motion of my shoulder? So I start testing that motion. I start icing it. I start heating it. I start doing things that lead to that, and all of a sudden confidence comes by because my shoulder is better, much, much better, to the point where you have healed yourself. Now, with that said, when that kind of thing happens, you have now gained this life experience that helps you take on other health conditions, because a lot of times in our society and in who we are, the health ones, anytime there's a sickness, it overwhelms the mind by design. They literally try to make sure that only the experts know how all these things go. When I see it on a regular basis, you don't have to do that. Like where I think the best in holistic, I always think of holistic people other than doctors. So doctors have this advantage, right? We've seen all the different physiology, how it works, all of those things. Disease processes, we know inherently, like if something looks weird, if it doesn't, that kind of thing. So a lot of times self-healing for a doctor, okay, that makes sense. All of the patients would say, yeah, that makes sense. But what about a farmer? Like sometimes the best, most intuitive people that I've seen have farm animals, have things where they had to do something to help these animals out. And I think that is in and of itself is pretty incredible. So just remember, intuition, experience and intuition matter. And the only way you can get that is experience it yourself. Okay. All right. So the core model from Sources of Power it's called recognition prime decision. Okay. So instead of looking at, so this is the big one. Experts often generate only one option at a time and evaluate it sequentially for good enough rather than optimal. They focus on situation assessment more than choice. So what we talked about is the classic example from the book was the fireground commanders who just knew to pull crews out seconds before a floor collapse. Oh, that's a different one. That's a different one. So they just knew the experience, right? So a lot of times you think of intuition and experience in fire, police, a lot of those, because it's like real time, right? It's like real time decision making that has to be made. And a lot of times that's the same thing in health and healing, right? Why don't we become those experts in these different things to have those kind of intuitional feelings, right? And so a lot of these books were designed for those acute major issues, but I'm trying to bring it to your head. Expertise, intuition, constantly learning will get you to another place that you really want to go. Okay. So biggest thing is like when things are under pressure, which is most of when people get sick, right? And that's what I like to talk about when see people have health issues that are just random health issues. Those kind of things with more expertise, more intuition become easier to adapt to than anything else, right? So let's go over that. So fireground commanders who just knew to pull crews out seconds before a floor collapse, the heat, the quietness, the fire's not acting correctly, those kind of things. Sorry, guys. It's going to be like that. The man gulch is the other one I was telling you about, the earlier story there. And why this works is because under pressure, expertise and intuition are really, really what takes off. Okay. Dynamic conditions. You have to be able to make decisions with incomplete data. And that is the key. Now let's use the example in this. My doctor just said I need to lose 20 pounds. Okay. So let's say I have no expertise or I have no intuition in this. That's just something, it's a rapid decision that has to be made. And like your doctor looks at you and goes, man, if you don't lose 20 pounds, I'm going to start putting you on all these medications. Now, the first thing is overwhelmed, right? Overwhelmed. I don't know what to do. Blah, blah, blah. Did I even listen to the doctor and what he said? Here's what you got to do. What if you started studying it? What if you started studying what a good carb is, what a good fat is, what protein, what is a ketogenic diet? What is all these things? When you start to seek those out, what happens? Once you start feeling better, you start reaching out a little bit more. Once you start seeing success in one of these areas versus just a pill that they tell you to do, right? You see success a little bit more. And the biggest one we're going to talk about tonight is bodybuilding, which is so crazy that I bring this up, but there's a reason, very specific reason where we want to bring this up. Okay, so in Gary Klein's book, the abilities that I want you to kind of hone into, and this is what is really, really matters in health and holistic, is once we get this experience, once we understand and start to study these kind of things, very small times at a time, it doesn't have to be a ton of work each time, but that ability experience unlocks, and then you can have it. Here's are the main things from sources of power: intuition and pattern recognition, seeing the familiar and the anomalous. Experts perceive a different world than novices do. Okay. Just like doctors versus patients, right? So think about an expert in weightlifting that looks at increasing weight versus a person that's just going into that weight room for the first time. Mental simulation, imagining how a course of action will play out and spotting the problems in advance. So we're going to use a weightlifter again. He's going to look, or she is going to look at developing a part of their body, right? So they already have a mental picture in their mind of how they want their body to work because of their expertise in weightlifting. Okay. So they've done the time, they've put the work in. Now they're doing this weightlifting regime, and it's almost addictive because they're keep improving their expertise so they can mentally see the result before it happens, which we've talked about that many times, right? In visualization stuff, metaphor and analogy. You can draw parallels from past experiences. So in a weightlifter, you say, okay, I didn't get a ton of results doing, 4 exercises. Maybe I'll do 3 and make it harder. And then all of a sudden my results are better, right? So there's metaphor and analogy using a health and wellness area. Storytelling. Of course, weightlifting is a great example of this, where if you get into it, you can meet those people, and there's like a brotherhood or a sisterhood to getting into weightlifting and exercise, because a lot of you will have different stories you can tell in, pushing your body to that next level, right? Seeing the invisible, noticing the things that are not there, motivation, fatigue, energy, all those things. When you go into the gym, you're like, why is today not the same? Right. And so that could be a big one. And I'm just using weightlifting as an example because place in there any kind of great physical activity that you really want to become an expert at. Maybe it's nutrition knowledge as well, right? So it can be any of those as long as it's something in the health field. Excuse me real quick. All right, we back. Okay. Don't think I did much with that. Okay. In provision and spotting leverage points. So once you get into weightlifting, all of a sudden you start to see that you can do unique lifts and get a cool result. So it doesn't have to be the same all the time. Reading minds, understanding when somebody's going through. So let's say you become a very big weightlifter in a gym, you can see when somebody else is struggling, trying to figure out an understanding. those things, or, those kind of things start becoming inherent, just like a firefighter. You're reading the situation, you become an expert. So place in there something other than weightlifting, do yoga, Tai Chi, uh, walking, any of those things. All of these things have all of these pieces that will lead to you understanding and getting healthier each and every day through the power of expertise and intuition. Okay. So that's what's so cool about his book, and why I know it's kind of a stretch in a sense, but it is so true. So now here's his other book. So Gary Klein, excuse me. Gary Klein had another book called The Power of Intuition. Okay. So the definition of intuition is the way we translate experience into judgment, decisions, and actions. It relies on stored patterns and action scripts. So the more healthy we get, no matter what it is, the better our action scripts and our patterns will be. Okay. It is learnable, domain specific, reliable only where you have meaningful, feedback rich experiences. 90% plus of critical decisions in real settings are intuitive. So that's really, really what we want to get through his work. Strengths and limitations: powerful for recognition and direction, valuable when experience is thin, feedback is poor, or the environment is novel or unstable. So anytime it's a new thing with not that experience behind it, the intuition falls off, right? So the more and more you do it, the more we get going. So the biggest thing is, in his world, we want to blend intuition plus analysis. Okay. So I know this is more, if you're looking at this, it's more like a business book in that sense, or, just an extreme situation. Well, let's say you wanted to be the best golfer at 60 you possibly can. Think about what there is. There's a power of that experience. So going out and playing on a regular basis, the more and more you play, the more chances you have to do things, the more you start to visualize things, the more you're setting up, figuring out different ways to become better. Now we talk about intuition, and the power of intuition is that experience leads into, when you have to make a decision, you'll make the right decision. Right. And that it's so important in health. And one of the major reasons I'm bringing this up is so many people want you to not have that expertise and intuition in your health, because the world makes so much money on it, guys. So much money. So, it's one of those things that the more knowledge you have in how to eat well, how to move well, how to think well, all of those things lead to a different experience when it comes to health and healing. One of the hardest things for me is that chiropractors aren't screaming from the rooftops and like trying to, almost, if you came into, I almost thought about this. If you come into a chiropractic clinic, it should be, okay, that's day one of a student's bachelor's degree in chiropractic innate intelligence healing. I've almost thought about that. I'm like, all right, we're going to make you guys learn and get a complete bachelor's degree. That's why I'm doing these online courses, to start us in the process to get to a bachelor's degree, in not finding out how you're going to take care of other people, guys, just taking care of us, right? Everybody does it. There's constantly learning. That's why it's so easy for me on a podcast night to find out things to go over, because it's that good, right? So just remember that, like the intuition. So remember his books. The first one was Sources of Power by Gary Klein. It's Klein, by the way. And then his other one is Power of Intuition. Okay. So one of the things that happens is, let's say we get really good in the power of intuition and we now know how to eat right. Okay. So now when we when we really begin and start experiencing eating clean and eating good ingredients and like all these beautiful things, when we don't, then our intuition will pick that up and go, okay, I know I need a reset, right? Versus what if you never learn those things? What if we just keep eating the same thing and just not learning that beautiful thing about eating cleaner and cleaner? What's neat about eating cleaner and cleaner, most of the time it's tastier and tastier. Like Rachel knows, all my patients know I will go to I will take a vacation. I'll take a vacation just to eat at a sweet restaurant. I swear. Like I am such a foodie on that. And what I've always noticed is all of the food is so good based on being as natural as they possibly can. A lot of these chefs, they, why their food tastes so much more master. A lot of times they're using lard for, cooking, spicing your foods with those herbal spices that we talk about, all of those beautiful things. It makes it worth every ounce of that food. You know what I mean? And that's what's so neat about getting that intuition in our health and healing. Okay. So these are some practical tools at that very end. I hope this made sense, guys. It makes sense to me. So hopefully we'll break it down and maybe go over this a little bit more. Maybe it was a little too much doing both books. Possibly it could be, but so right now what we're going to go over is how to kind of accelerate, learn getting this expertise and the power of intuition going for us. Okay. So this is what Dr. Klein says is his 3-tiered approach to accelerating his expertise. Identify decision requirements of the job. What hard decisions must be made under what constraints? So when I look at that question in health and healing, I would say, okay, where am I at now? Health-wise, where am I? Let's be square. Let's say, am I in the best shape of my life? Am I in the worst shape of my life? Where am I? And be as real about it as you possibly can. Okay, so that would be step 1. Practice in context decision-making exercises, scenarios, and simulations that force rapid recognition and mental stimulation. Okay, so now I know where I'm at. And let's say I want to lose, feel better in just eating correctly. Instead of putting myself in those situations, maybe mock play them and say, okay, I'm in front of I'm opening the refrigerator now. What am I grabbing? Right? What am I grabbing out of that refrigerator? That's going to be the key to understanding what, how to build our own intuition, because we're going to go there versus do the action, right? Review experiences deliberately. Decisions critique after action reviews to turn events into better mental models. So if we didn't eat correctly, I just did this the other night. I was like, we were watching a movie or something and I ate perfect all day. Oh, and then the killer, we sat down for a movie and I decided that cereal sounded really good. I think I have a thing for granola cereal. Next thing I know, I'm like, dang it. It would have been like an absolute perfect day. And I didn't even need to eat the food. But my subconscious brain said, because we were doing that movie, that's what I needed at that time. So that is a big one that we can talk about. Okay. Now, the big thing is, as you look at all this stuff, and hopefully it's making sense. Your decision-making in health is the key, right? We constantly are doing that. Experts are fighting to get you to do all these decisions. We're not helping our expertise, though. And that's what I want you to get. If we can gain some more knowledge in each and every place, that's why 1% Tribe is so important to me, because I'm trying to get as much information in your face as humanly possible, so that it's not about just understanding and taking this supplement or that supplement. That stuff comes with what's needed, right? Really, it's about the decision making, and that hey, this is what I'm going through. Because if you can be real with yourself in that intuition, and you have some good, nutrition knowledge, things start to change. One of the things that happens is we get really good. We get really good at being an expert in sickness. We are really good in expert in sickness. We're like, this is my thing, right? This is my sickness. This is what I got to deal with. But are we really good at getting and being an expert at being actually healthy? That is a different concept, right? We are amazing as a society of telling everybody what's wrong. Everybody's telling you what's wrong with them, what's wrong with you. If just listen to one commercial, how terrible you must be based on that commercial. And it's one of those things that's just so fascinating because it's such a beautiful journey. And I feel like sometimes patients don't get to take it with them, take that journey with it. And that's why I love tonight. Oh, Bradford's here. Let's see. Yes. Good feelings can actually be good and not doom oriented. Very true. Very true. Because a lot of times these good, and the more knowledge you have, right? And Brian, I know you're a knowledge seeker. Did you know all the stuff you know now? No. Are you supposed to? No. That's what the journey is. And what has happened is some of these things that'll happen, these sicknesses, these whatever conditions will happen. How do you learn and grow from them? My father went through a situation this week. He's got a little heart situation, but really wasn't ready to ask a lot of questions, in the beginning. And so this time I kind of had to go with him and do the situation. And I go, here's what we need to know, Dad. This situation, is these are the markers, like you're going to get on the scale every day and you're going to at least know how much you weigh. If you know how much you weigh, and if you go up 6 or 7 pounds in a day and you ate really good the night before, then that's cause for, hey, we should probably talk about something, right? So it's the more knowledge that you have. And with it's one of those that, you can reverse a lot of that. You just got to know how far to push your body and when not to, right? And so that's the biggest thing. It's like he's going to do some cardiac therapy. He's stuck doing it, no matter if he likes it or not, but he's going to go. But you have to push your body to a level that you actually see in a result too, right? So sometimes that can happen as well. But how are you going to know that he's gone through this situation? But you got to understand that knowledge, right? And so he's like, man, I wish I would have asked my doctor. I go, I know. Doctors aren't expecting you to ask these questions, right? Or even study what you have. A lot of my chiropractic patients do, and they come in with some great questions for me even, and just saying, okay, this is what this means, right? And so if that means that, then let's start working towards a different goal, for you to make sure that isn't the end of you and we don't become just an expert at the sickness, right? That's the big thing. Okay. So I think that was good for there. But just remember, in any healthcare situation, we want to review. Okay. So you wouldn't be an expert in football and go out and run football plays. And then when the football play didn't work, we wouldn't say, yeah, that's okay. We'll just put a new football play in every single time. No, you're going to evaluate it. You're going to evaluate that until you get this expertise of running that certain play. And then once that certain play takes off, you'll actually have intuition and expertise when something in the other team, when they do something different that would throw you off, this will allow you to have that expertise, to have that intuition, right? That's the beauty of, like all of these things. I was watching this year, Indiana University won the national title. But one of the things is they won a lot of people's hearts because you could see the amount of work. There was almost no doubt in almost every play they ran, regardless of them being against much higher, bigger, stronger talent almost all year long. And that is phenomenal. That's phenomenal. But that comes from expertise, intuition. That's what I want you guys to all get onto. Okay. So, biggest thing. Oh, that's the other thing I was going to bring up. But please remember, these smart systems, these AIs, they're trying to think and take away your expertise and intuition for you. See, they're afraid that no one's afraid of it. They just don't make as much money on the person that's an expert in the field of whatever. Okay. So think about, an expert fireman. He knows all the things. There's nothing new you're going to sell that fireman. He's going to know if this piece of equipment this new company's bringing in is a piece of junk or not, right? The expert, the experienced guy is going to see that, right? So the more expertise, a lot of times you're going to find yourself, doing a better job in discerning like what's good health-wise, good or bad. Okay. So what, let's go through, this is a little too deep for this, but just remember the technology stuff. Okay. The technology stuff is going to be designed to try to take your decision-making away. If the more decision-making you take away from yourself, the more expertise and intuition you will not have. And if that starts to happen, then how can you trust your own intuition? That's what you want, right? You want to have knowledge from the best experts in the world in nutrition, health, have your best coaches, have a great MD, have a great chiropractor, have a great natural, whatever, right? Massage, acupuncture, any of those people, put them in your life, but don't just put them in your life. Ask them questions. Learn, keep going. That's the 1% tribe. Tonight is our 1% improvement. Okay. So just remember that. And then remember, remember my guy. Oh, where'd it go? Did I put it in here? Okay. So just remember this Gary Klein and then fantastic. They're very old. And one of the things is with Gary Klein, it's Klein, the power of, dang it, I always forget because it's been so long. Okay. Power of intuition. And the other one is sources of power. Okay. So power of intuition and sources of power. Very quick reads, really worth doing. Okay. I still want to do a book club where everybody reads them at the same time. I think that'd be fun. So what are we going to do for our 1% tonight? This is what I want you to do. Pick one. Ready? The key is to become a health and expert for your body, your own body. Become an expert in working out. Become an expert at making great meals. Any of these, you pick one. Become an expert at meditation. Become an expert at an active skill set, running, swimming, biking, hiking. One of my friends, Josh and Holly, I just shout out to them. They just did a huge Iowa bike ride. And I know Josh has been an athlete for a long time. The pride moment is Holly. I did not think she would. That is a pretty impressive situation for her to like actually get on a bike and go that far. It was this really big ride in Iowa. Fantastic. So, but those are the things. Become an expert in working out. Become an expert at great meals. Once you start doing these things, life can change. When you focus in on the health and well-being of your life, then you have control of it. Then you get this cool intuition. Then you have this expertise to make decisions when things aren't going that way, right? You'll have these different ways that go about it. So I hope I didn't screw that up. I thought I was good. And hopefully you didn't lose it too much in the ether. I'll probably go back and attack that subject again at some point, but I hope you guys did appreciate it. Or hope you understood what we were trying to get across. But so this week, become an expert. Start. The only way you can become an expert is like read your first book on whatever, right? So pick one of those subjects. Let's get after it. Let's be all experts in walking or line dancing. I don't care. It's going to be a great day if you can start doing that. And then your tuition will flow. And guess what's next? Your health and longevity will flow too. So with that said, you guys enjoy the rest of your week. See you Wednesday night for Whole Health Weekly, 8:30 on Wednesday night. All right. Take it easy. Don't forget, subscribe, Tribe1, TRIBE1.substack.com to get the latest newsletter. Have a great day.